Welcome, everyone. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. And I've got a treat for you today because I'm going to be reviewing one of my favorite books and one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, and one of your favorite fantasy series of all time, and that is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, book number 1 in the Wheel of Time. What is my history with this series? I'm going to tell you. It goes back all the way to February of 1990 when the very first version of this book ever came out. I bought it the very week that it came out. It was a trade paperback version of The Eye of the World that I saw sitting on the shelf in the Chapel Square Mall Walden Books in New Haven, Connecticut. That's where I bought the original trade paperback. I don't know where that paperback went because when the series got popular, Tor Books came out with hardcovers of every book, and I got rid of my trade paperbacks and replaced them with the hardcovers. Don't know where those trade paperbacks went. Probably some used bookstore in Provo, Utah. Don't know. But I replaced them with all these hardcovers. Now, since then, they've come out with, just recently, Tor Books has re-released all of the books in these brand new trade paperbacks with these covers here. And so I've got all of my original hardcovers, and I've also got all of the entire series in this trade paperback format. If you follow the series, you know what I'm talking about. And I've also got all the little mass market paperbacks, and I also have each book in Audible. And for this series of reviews, because I've read the first 6 books in this series probably 4 to 5 times each. And then the remaining 8 or 9 books I've read once. So as I review these books, keep in mind, I've read the first 6 a lot. The last 10 or so I've read once each. And so I am rereading them all for this review, for my book review channel here. And I just reread The Wheel of Time, and I'm going to review it, and I'm going to give you some writing advice as I review it. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail in this review than most of my reviews. So seatbelt yourself into your chair, or whatever you do to keep yourself from being blown away by my massively awesome reviews. Just buckle up and be prepared, because we're going to go on a ride here, folks. And let's start just by talking about the covers. The new covers versus the old iconic covers. Now, this cover of this trade paperback was done, and it's a good cover. There's a nice painting of either Rand or Matt on the mast of a ship, done by David Grove, the illustrator. It's a decent cover. And as we go through each book, and I'm going to try to review each book once a month. We're going to go through them one at a time. I'm going to try to read one every month and leave a review, but I'm also going to be comparing and contrasting covers. The new cover versus our iconic Daryl K. Sweet cover. It's on this one. It's on my hardcover here. Which one do I like better? The new version or the old-timey Daryl K. Sweet version? I know a lot of people do not like the Daryl Sweet covers, but I'm going to tell you right now, for those of you who do not like the Daryl K. Sweet covers, you're wrong. And it must hurt to be so wrong about something, because Daryl K. Sweet is an awesome painter. And these are some great covers. These are some iconic covers, and we even get inside some even more Daryl K. Sweet art. The dude is a painterly painter. He's a great illustrator. And in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, this guy illustrated so many fantasy and science fiction books. He painted like a madman. His stuff was everywhere. And he's a great painter. The only thing that most people, the thing that I don't like about his stuff is all of his dudes and ladies, they all look the same. It doesn't matter what book he painted it for. They all look kind of the same. But he's such a great painter, and these are great, iconic covers. So I give the nod to the original version. I think it's a better painting. I think it sets the tone for us. Let's move on from the artwork to the actual book. Right from the get-go. You know, when I read these, when I read through all of these books, you know, as they were coming out in the 90s and stuff, I was buying them one at a time. The week they came out, I was the first one in line to get each version, to get Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, Dragon Reborn, I mean, on and on and on. I was right there as a fan following this series as it was being put out. So I was one of those guys that was waiting every year for a new book to come out, new book to come out, new book to come out. That's why the first 6 books got read so often, is because when the new one would come out, I would reread the ones. And then, you know, the series got kind of long, winded there in the middle, and then Brandon Sanderson picked it up. Anyway, Eye of the World itself, just from the get-go, and we're going to be doing a little bit of writing advice here as I go along with this review. So, just from the very first paragraph of the very prologue of this book, we know that we are in the hands of a master craftsman when it comes to writing. And I want you up-and-coming writers, people that are learning the craft of writing. You can watch my video as just to someone who loves books, and you can also watch my videos as someone who is learning to write. If you're learning to write, you need to study this book. The first paragraph of this book, you know, just absorb what he's doing in that prologue to set things up. And then when you get to the first chapter, study Robert Jordan's introduction to our 2 first characters, Rand and Tam, and just notice how he sets up what they're wearing, what they're holding, exactly where they are in the landscape. See how he sets that up. See how he describes those characters, and study it and take notes on how he interweaves everything they're wearing and everything they're holding and how they look and the environment they're in right from the start. You know, you get a crystal clear vision of who these people are, where they're at, and what dangers they face right off the bat. You need to kind of figure out how Robert Jordan does that in that scene, because he does it so well. He sets up the forest, the deep dark forest that they're traveling through, and the imminent danger that they face right from the get-go. I mean, the tension is built, and watch how he interweaves the tension in with the description of the characters in the forest in itself, until we finally get to see the cloaked rider with the cloak that doesn't move in the wind, and just how chilling that is for Rand to see that. And watch, just in that first chapter, you get yourself a master class in writing and building tension, building character, building tension, setting up a scene, introducing a scene and characters that people understand and people vision in their head right from the get-go. And you can do that throughout each chapter as the characters go into Edmund's Field, as we meet Matt Cuthon, as we're introduced to Lorraine and Lan. Notice how we're introduced to Lorraine and Lan even before they show up on scene. You can see how the mystery around those 2 characters is built up and built up and built up. And they're hinted at and hinted at even before they show up. And so when they do show up, they just come across as grand, mysterious, new figures in a really small village. And it gives you a punch to the gut, and it sort of sets the tone of the grandness and the scale of the world that Robert Jordan is building, because he's starting small, just in a forest, into a small village, but he's interweaving sort of this grand sort of world outside of ourselves by hinting and teasing us with just little bits and pieces of characters that we haven't seen yet. And then when they show up on scene, it's all the more impactful. Chapter 3, we get into the introduction of Perrin Abira and Padden Fane. Again, introduction. And then we get into, the 2 Rivers itself, Edmund's Field. I grew up in a small town in Sevier County, Utah, and so you there's a lot of, Sevier County, Utah is like Edmund's Field. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. middle of nowhere, in Sevier County, Utah. We're in the middle of the desert. But anytime anybody rolled through town that had any sort of interesting story to tell, people stop and listen because, they're isolated. They're isolated just as I grew up. So I related to being in this small village like Edmonds Field, like our main characters, Rand and Matt and Perrin, and having people from outside come in and tell us of the outside world. And Robert Jordan does that so well in this, where you've got small village boys that don't know much about the outside world, and these mysterious figures drop in. The Gleeman, Moraine and Patton Fane and Lan and the Gleeman, they drop in on them and they start telling them of the Dragon Reborn and grand things that are happening outside their villages. And it's just so exciting. And you need to pay attention how Robert Jordan does this in these opening chapters, how the Gleeman weaves a tale for Rand and Matt and Perrin and Egwene. He weaves a tale that describes, it's the backstory to our whole world. It's the exposition scene and the exposition dump and the backstory dump that everyone dreads writing. But Robert Jordan puts it right there in the Gleeman's tale inside the inn as they're just all listening to him talk. And we get the entire the backstory of the world of this world that we're just going to explore just rains down on us as the Gleeman talks, and it's weaved in there so smoothly, so brilliantly. And this is stuff that you got to learn from, folks. If you're a writer, you need to learn from it. Because again, the mystery and the tension and the world building is now within the first 4 to 5 chapters. We're there, man. We're living in this small village, and we're small town boys, and we see that there's something grander out there. Dangerous, Dragon Reborns, the One Power, all of these things are getting introduced to us, and it's just juicy, good, delicious fantasy fun. And Robert Jordan, man, he smacks us over the head with it in such brilliant ways, just brilliant introductions, And it fills us with not only is Rand, Matt, Perrin, and Egwene filled with a sense of wonder over the Gleeman's tales and over, Lorraine and Lan, Moraine and Land. I keep calling her Lorraine. I think it's Moraine. God, I mean, I've read it over and over, and there's so many characters, But I think it's Moraine or Lorraine, whatever. We'll go with whichever one it really is what I'm saying, even if I'm getting it wrong, because my tongue is twisted, and now I'm having a brain fog where I can't even remember main characters' names. I apologize. Hey, the production values on these videos, they're just over the top. They're in and out of focus. I can't remember characters' names. It is what it is. But all of the bad stuff will be edited out. You'll notice that. You won't even see this rant I'm doing right here. Robert Jordan's created one of the greatest fantasy worlds of all. The world building is second to none. This is one of the grandest other than Lord of the Rings. This is it. This is the grandest world building we've ever gotten out of fantasy ever. And I'm talking these guys, they're in a small village. They go off onto an adventure. There's Trollocs, which are evil creatures that come in, destroy the village. I'm going to give spoilers through this. This is a spoilery review. All of my Robert Jordan book reviews will be full of spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, if these are books that you are thinking of reading, you can stop right now. I give these great glowing reviews, but stop right now. I'm going to be talking about spoilers a little bit from here on out. So let's just talk about what happens. The village gets ransacked by the Trollocs and the bad guys and the Forsaken and the evil guys and everybody else. And they're searching for their boys. They're searching for Rand, Matt, Perrin. They leave off on their adventure, and then they're off on their adventure, and then we get more world building and more chases through dark woods, and this is where it's all relatable. If you've ever been camping in the wilderness, in the dark, thinking of all the monsters and bears and scary creatures, the lions and tigers, and all that can be out in the woods that can get you, you know what it's like when these guys flee in the dark into the woods and they have to be chased. I mean, it's like Frodo and Pippin and Merry and Sam off fleeing from the Shire to Rivendell. That's what we got with Rand, Matt, and Perrin and Gwen, they flee off into the wilderness with people in dark cloaks chasing them, and Trollocs, which are like these orc ogre type people. And it's great because we can relate to this. If you've been out in the wilderness, you relate. You know what it's like to be in the dark wilderness and the haunting, creepy things that might be chasing you, right? We've all been there. It's relatable. It's very relatable to most of us. And Robert Jordan just paints these pictures of these characters fleeing their village that's been ransacked off onto this grand adventure where there's a dragon reborn, there's a one power, they don't know anything about any of this stuff yet. Who is the dragon reborn? Who are they? And then they flee and they flee and they go to different inns and stay in different cities and have different adventures. And one of the adventures I remember, they get to Shadar Logoth, the ancient haunted ruined city, where they go in there because it's the only safe place they can hide from the bad guys, because it's such a haunted city that the bad guys won't even go in there. So they go in there to hide. And they're given, and our village boys are given one instruction: just don't wander around and touch crap. Just don't do it. That's it. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Just keep together. Let's stay on the down low. Let's keep it on the down low that we're in here. Don't go wandering about and don't go touch anything. So what do? As soon as nobody's looking, they go wander about and they start touching things, right? And when I first read it, I was like, oh, this is kind of stupid now. The book has kind of gone into stupid territory. Now the characters are doing stupid things just to advance the plot, because a lot happens as they wander around and start touching things. Matt gets a poison dagger that makes him crazy, and they start seeing visions and speaking words and languages that they've never heard before, and it starts to make them think that maybe they're part of some sort of ancient lineage. And all of these things happen because they've done this stupid thing and wandered off, right? And as I was first reading it, for the longest time I was like, that was just kind of like Robert Jordan being lazy and putting in a thing and having their characters do stupid things to advance the plot. But as I've grown older and as I've become a writer myself, I realize I was way off. I was wrong about that. And I shouldn't have judged that part of the book so harshly, because let's think realistically about it. When I was a young guy, let's just put me from South Severe. Let's say I go off onto a grand adventure. And I'm being chased through the woods. And as a young kid, you just dream of. That's why we read fantasy books, is because we want that to be us. And if you say that I'm going into a haunted ancient city full of ruins and danger and mystery and tell me don't wander off, it's the first thing I'm going to do as a kid. As a teenage boy like Rand, Matt, and Perrin, I'm gonna be like, let's see what's out there. When the adults aren't looking, let's go. Yeah, it wasn't a bad thing. It's not stupid. It's not a bad thing. It's not lazy writing. It's actually very accurate writing. As a kid, I would have been like, let's go touch everything in the haunted forest and city, and let's go in every building. I want to see what's in every building. I want to see what creepy stuff is here. I would have done it. I would have been the first one. I would have been the one talking Matt and Perrin and Rand into it. I'd been like, dudes, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. They're not looking. Lan and Wherein, they're not looking. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. And we would have touched all the bad shit, and we would have been poisoned by everybody and everything that we came across, and we would have died. End of book. If I was on the quest, I would have gotten us all killed. But Rand, Matt, and Perrin, they survive the forest city, the ruined city, and then they go off on their other adventure and they meet other people. And then they meet, they come across Min, and that's another scene. There's some iconic scenes here where the character Min sort of sees things in the pattern, and she talks, and watch that. See how Robert Jordan builds the tension just with these little small scenes, like with Min, where she tells the adventurers just hints of their future, and it builds the tension, it amps up the tension so beautifully. It's so wonderfully done. And and then when Rand, and then there's other things, where Rand, another iconic scene I remember is Rand, They reach the city cane line, and Rand goes up onto the wall because the dragonry, the false dragon, is being dragged through the city, and he wants to get a look at the guy. So he climbs up on the wall, the castle wall, of course, and that's where he meets, Gawain and Galad and Elaine, three of our other iconic characters that come up. And then there's the scene where Tom Merrilin the Gleeman is killed. And just pay attention to if you're a young writer, pay attention to all those scenes. I'm bringing those scenes up specifically because they're done so masterfully by Robert Jordan. Introducing characters, tugging on our heartstrings when other characters are supposedly dead or dying on the adventure. And, that's about all I want to say about the book, really. It's just more of a little bit of a writing advice and just me gushing on the world building, the character creation of The Wheel of Time is on a level that we, as readers, have never seen before. And I know there's Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen that is grand. I know that there's George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, which is grand. And I know that there's the Tad Williams, and I know that there's J.R.R. Tolkien. There's even myself. I write huge epic fantasy novels. All of us pale in comparison to the created world of Robert Jordan and The Wheel of Time. It is on an extra large size level. If you have not read these books before, please do. Please do. There's 14 books or some odd books in the series. And the first 6 books are some of the best fantasy writing and world building, character creation you will ever experience in your reading life. I do admit there's a lull in the story for about 5 books there, but then the series comes back and it ends just fantastically. Eye of the World, Book 1, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. A solid, huge, massive, favorable 10 out of 10 from me, a fellow writer who's tried to emulate what this guy does. I give Eye of the World 10 out of 10. If we could give books higher than 10 out of 10, we would give this one higher than that. But let's go 10 out of 10 for Eye of the World, Robert Jordan. I hope you've enjoyed this review. We'll be getting to, like I said, once a month, I'll try to read through this series again and review each book. Man, I love this series. Oh, I love it. Love it. Love it. And you should too.